Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to everyone joining us this evening for our event, Improving Wellbeing Through Breathwork. My name is Abby, and I'm the Events and Partnership Manager at Drop Bio Health, and I'm excited to be facilitating this event today. Before I introduce today's guest, I would firstly like to acknowledge and pay respects to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of the nations on which we each stand today. For anyone here today who's new to Drop Bio Health, we've been around for a few years now, and our mission is to help you become the healthiest version of yourself. We do this through our free events with health experts and products such as our at-home finger prick blood test designed to help you detect and revert health trends over time to improve your quality of life. To join the waitlist ahead of the next release, check out the link in our chat box. Dr. Kaitlin Harkess is a registered clinical psychologist and a senior yoga instructor who is passionate about supporting individuals to live intentional lives that align with their deepest values. Kaitlin is particularly interested in integrative psychology approaches and has completed published research exploring the psychoneuroimmunological, I think I got that right, and epigenetic practice of yoga as a tool to support individuals experiencing chronic stress and symptoms of anxiety and depression. She's also a really long time friend of Drop Now, and we're so grateful to have her and her lovely, warm, calm presence back here for another event. So welcome back, Dr. Kaitlin.
Thank you so much for having me, Abby, and the Drop Bio team.
We love having you. It's such a privilege. Thank you so much. So we're going to get to that breathwork presentation really shortly. I just wanted to let our audience know that we've got the chat box running. So please feel free to introduce yourself and join the conversation there. And if you have any questions for Kaitlin, please put them in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of the screen. And I will read those out to be answered at the end of Kaitlin's presentation. Now, it's important to remember that any advice given in this event is general, and for any personal queries, make sure you see your GP. But without further ado, let's dive into the topic of breathwork and how we can use it to improve our well-being. Thank you so much, Kaitlin.
Beautiful. Hello, everyone. So I will start by sharing my screen, and we'll get a presentation up for those of you who are visual learners, something to anchor us and guide us along. So we're going to get into this presentation with some real practical exercises, tools, and essentially first a check-in. So I'd like you just to take a moment now and just check in with how you're feeling. And to make it fairly simple, we're going to use the Likert scale, a scale of 1 to 7. If 1 is you feeling pretty blah, maybe you're feeling really flat, maybe really low, or maybe you're feeling really overwhelmed, but the sort of icky side of things, that might be your 1. Versus a 7 might be feeling really vital, really alive, really in yourself, really present right now. A 4 being somewhere in between that. If you just have a look at the scale up now, there's some smiley faces to guide you along. And maybe make a note. You know, ideally, we might be putting our phones away from us during the presentation, but on this occasion, you might even tap into the notes section a number to kind of give us a sense as to where things are right now. And with this information in mind, I would like to introduce you to something called diaphragmatic breathing. Now, it's really just named for the diaphragm, which is the sort of under our ribs area that kind of contains our lungs, you know, this upper part of our torso. So that's the diaphragm. And when it moves up and down, it assists our lungs in their inhalation and their exhalation. Easier to practice than to talk. So sit comfortably. If you are standing, also completely fine. I appreciate you standing at your work desk, perhaps at the end of a day, but if you're seating, place your feet flat on the floor. And then take one hand and please place it on your chest. Your second hand, placing it on your abdomen. And just start by breathing in and then breathing out. I know the screen has some tempting words that you might be wanting to read to follow along, but if you can just close your eyes and let that urge go for this moment and just notice how you're breathing. Noticing the quality of your breath and the pace. And just noticing if you're breathing in and out by way of your nose. Noticing if the hand on your chest is moving. Notice if the hand on your abdomen is moving. I'll explain the whys and the hows through the course of this presentation and ask for a little bit of trust in this moment. As best you can, if it is feasible for your body and what's going on right now, could you shift your breath to simply nose breathing, nasal breathing? Perhaps gently sealing your lips. So you're breathing in and breathing out by way of your nose. And then what would it be like to draw that breath, if it has perhaps mainly been the hand on your chest moving, down to your abdomen, down to your belly? What would it be like to set an intention to have your abdomen, your belly moving out and in? So with the inhale, feeling the belly expand out, and with the exhale, feeling your belly draw in and out. A low, slow flow. And if you notice that your mouth opens or the hand on your chest starts to move, that's completely fine. We're setting a seed of intention here that we're going to practice again and again, gently sealing those lips, drawing the breath in through your nose down to your belly, and then gently letting the abdomen contract back. And notice what your natural rhythm is here. Perhaps ever so slightly extending the exhale, that letting go, that releasing of your breath. Taking 2 more cycles. And carry on in your own way as you might like. Just making a mental note now or a physical note on the phone. Where are you at on that scale? You know, has anything shifted? Has anything changed? If we're going 1 in the sort of blah zone to 7 in the vital zone. We're going to be talking about a few things along breath today. We're going to be talking about your nervous system and how breath actually functions. Abby so beautifully introduced the concept of psychoneuroimmunology in my introduction earlier, which is because I am a little bit or a lot of a nerd in this area, and I will be explaining to you what psychoneuroimmunology is and how breath essentially affects this whole system, which is to say it affects your whole way of being. We're going to talk about why breathing, why this practice, why is this important, and then how to practice. Yes, we've been introduced to diaphragmatic breathing. We're going to build on that. So you're going to have a few exercises by the end of today's presentation to walk away with and to implement in your daily life. So this is a little bit wordy, but essentially my name is Dr. Kaitlin Harkess, and you can find me at drkaitlin.com. That is where I kind of offer my general resources around how we actually cultivate a sense of vitality and thriving in our lives. It is really my mission to ensure that we can all move towards our best versions of ourselves, because I believe not only does that ease some of the suffering that comes with this being human in our lives, but allows us to show up in our families, in our communities, in our world in such a way that we leave a legacy that has positive implications. And I think that's hugely important to ensure that our world can lift and that we as a community can support our world each other to thrive in a time where, you know, a lot of the highlights we're seeing on the news are not so effective, are not so helpful. And I do believe that we can do better, and we start by taking care of ourselves here. So I host a podcast called Wisdom for Wellbeing, where I share resources and where individuals who I see as really prominent, wise individuals in the field come on, and we have discussions to support you in navigating this way forward, navigating the best version of yourself. And I've had the pleasure of chatting about some of these areas that I am so passionate about, you know, on some TV programs, writing some blogs, some resources. So there's stuff out there, but let it kind of give you a bit of a taste of some of these areas of passion. So I want to know what you're doing right now. And the answer is you're breathing, right? You were breathing before you walked into this presentation or logged into this presentation. You were breathing 10, 20, 4 days ago, right? You're always breathing, yet you generally don't think about it. Sure, in the breathing exercise, you're probably thinking about it. As I started this presentation around breath, you might have checked in, but generally it is something that's happening unconsciously. It's under the control of something called your autonomic nervous system. Now, your autonomic nervous system controls the basic functions of your body. It allows you to exist. And there's two parts of it. You have your fight or flight response, which we call your sympathetic nervous system, and your rest and digest response, which we call your parasympathetic nervous system. Your breath is affected and affects each of these areas. So what I mean by that is that in times of high stress, in times of alarm, your breathing pattern is under the control of that sympathetic side, and your breath is going to reflect you moving into a fight or flight response. Similarly, when you are relaxed, when you are calm, when you are in this parasympathetic nervous system state, this rest and digest state, your breath is going to be affected by that. Now, you probably have a bit of a sense that when we're in states of alarm, fight or flight, our breath might be quicker, shallower. When we're more relaxed, our breath might be a little bit more like that breath work that we were doing at the beginning of this presentation. However, I think it's always helpful to come back to a tiger example because I am a huge fan of evolutionary psychology. It explains so much about us, our bodies, and our minds. So if a tiger is coming towards you, what do you want to do? Right? You want to get away. You want to survive. We are wired to survive and to reproduce. So in terms of survival, in terms of getting away from this tiger, what do you have to do? Well, you likely have to run or fight. In the case of the tiger, let's assume that you're going to run and you're going to try and get behind a boulder. However, you're not thinking about that. Your system, controlled by the autonomic nervous system, automatic nervous system, is going into that sympathetic response, and suddenly your heart rate is speeding up. That's going to help to pump oxygen-rich blood into your arms and your legs, to these big muscle groups, to fuel you as you run faster. You're going to have to breathe more. You're going to have to inhale, get oxygen in to offer fuel to those big muscle groups. Meanwhile, the blood from your brain, from the prefrontal cortex, the part that does the higher level thinking, the part that I had involved in doing this presentation, and likely the part that you'll have online as you're digesting this information, that turns off in a survival response because that blood is better served by going to your arms and your legs. Because remember, you don't want to be lunch. Similarly, the blood from your digestive system, it's not going to be digesting your lunch. It is also going to your arms and your legs, which explains why when we're overwhelmed, when we're stressed, we start to maybe feel like a little bit wheezy, a little bit butterfly. Some of us will be running to the bathroom, like our bowels are doing all sorts of things because our survival response really just wants us to be moving. So you've likely had that. I know I have, we all have. It is really embedded in our DNA, and we don't get to control that. Where we can control is that we can flip more quickly into our parasympathetic nervous system. However, I promised that I would share with you what psychoneuroimmunology actually means. So before we link the parasympathetic flip back, I'd like to share with you some of the systems. This is not even all the systems that are covered in psychoneuroimmunology, and not even all of the systems that are affected by your fight or flight, by your sympathetic response, but we've got your endocrine system. So this is your hormones. Chances are you've heard a lot about stress because you exist in this modern day society where 93% of the adult population reports themselves to be highly stressed. So you know about stress, and you probably have heard about cortisol, which is a measure of stress. And that's a hormonal measure of stress. So that's a measure that marks your endocrine system being online and essentially saying to your body, hey, something's going on, we need to be alert. We've got your nervous system, and we have neurotransmitters in our brains, chemicals in the brain that can wire us more to what we might consider to be an anxious state because they're looking for threats in the environment or training us to, or maybe perhaps a more relaxed state or a feel-good state. These things are part of your nervous system. And then we've got your immune system. Your immune system is essentially what's garnered, what's evoked when we want to fight off illness. So your cytokines, these inflammatory markers, are markers of your immune system. Coming back to the tiger then, when a tiger is coming towards you, your system is kind of like, we gotta get away. So you are running along in this fight or flight response, and a message from your brain is sent down into your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, your HPA axis, your endocrine system to say, okay, there's a threat. So it comes online. Similarly, your immune system is told, hey, quickly online here, because if the tiger bites you and breaks your skin, you're vulnerable for an infection. So having your immune system online and ready to fight, ready to address any infection in the body is also a survival response. So your immune system kicks into high gear. And this is all fine when it's a short-term stressor like a tiger, or even if it's a short-term stressor like an uncomfortable phone call that you need to make, or a challenging email that you're writing. The difficulty is that probably many of us here, have experienced chronic stress, which is to say it's unrelenting. So when those emails keep coming in, when those messages keep coming up, when caregiving responsibilities, relationship challenges, financial difficulties are constantly creeping in, our body is having this stress response again and again. So while you might see on the left side of this slide that actually we can improve our performance with a little bit of stress, I am no way saying that all stress is bad. We can actually enter a state of eustress. Eu is the Greek word for good. Eustress at times, right? When we have the appropriate pressures, we show up. I got these slides done because I had a deadline. I got here because I had an alarm, a calendar, or there was a bit of stress, like positive stress that likely had us all showing up here tonight, and likely has us all getting to meetings, getting to work, getting to places we need to be on time. Stress is in no way a bad thing. It helps our problem solving, gives us energy. However, there's a tipping point. When that stress gets too much, when we start to experience incredibly challenging situations, maybe in our environment or maybe in terms of our mental state, we go into a state of distress. Distress is where we experience the symptoms of anxiety and depression that you might have experienced, or you might be familiar with individuals who have experienced. I mean, half of us, right? This is an unfortunately common experience in our society. So I don't necessarily want you to take away the message from today's presentation that stress is bad and that's why we must breathe. Stress is fine when it's controlled, when it's eustress, when it's healthful stress. And chronic stress, unrelenting stress is challenging. Breath helps us move from sympathetic nervous system activation back to parasympathetic nervous system activation. So what that actually means is that while you might still experience that wave of anxiety when you get a message or when you see an event in your calendar, if you are able to move back to parasympathetic nervous system activation, rest and digest response more quickly, you are going to be healthier for it. So breath helps you with that. There are a couple of parts of the system that I think would be useful for me to explain a bit further if you're willing. And one is the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is the main nerve of your parasympathetic nervous system. Vagus essentially means wandering. It wanders down through virtually your entire upper body, touching upon your throat area, controlling your speech, your heart, your lungs, your digestive system. So really what this means is the vagus nerve is affected by and affects every part of your parasympathetic nervous system. Now, you've probably had the same experience I have when we're a little bit nervous and our throat gets tight and our breathing gets short. We can actually feel these effects. The vagus nerve is what helps to kind of cultivate relaxation if it is toned. So like if I go to the gym and I lift some weights, I might cultivate more tone in my muscle. When we appropriately stimulate our vagus nerve, we have more tone. It has more strength. It has more ability to move us from a sympathetic nervous system activation to a parasympathetic nervous system activation, which means that there's going to be less load on your body. We refer to this as your allostatic load. Doesn't really matter if we use that term. It basically just means wear and tear. The more time that you spend in sympathetic nervous system activation, in that high arousal state, the more these symptoms are experienced, these effects are experienced, there's more wear and tear in terms of your nervous system, your hormonal system, your body. This is kind of where we burn out physiologically, as well as in terms of our mental state. So the breath helps to create vagal tone. Not only does this take some of the wear and tear off the body, but it also supports us in cultivating what we would call focused attention. Now, what I mean by that is your ability to be present here. You might have heard of mindfulness, for instance. Your ability to be present, that's kind of like a muscle too. Our minds wander. There's something called the default mode network. This is where our minds tend to wander to when things are vacant. When we don't have something that we're actively working on or thinking about, our minds wander. Now, chances are you're like most of the population. And when your mind wanders, when there's these quiet moments, you're thinking about everything that could go wrong, everything that had go wrong, everything that is wrong. And then your mind does not become the nicest place to call your home. That's normal, which isn't to say that it's helpful and isn't to say that it's inevitable or that it's necessarily the way things have to be for you. When you are focused on your breath, you offer your mind an anchor to come back to again and again and again, rather than falling into that default mode network. So you're essentially training present moment awareness. That's incredible, because we know that people who are more present with the moment, regardless of their activity, have a more elevated mood, are happier. They feel better. So if you are presently focused as you take out the garbage, the weight of the garbage bag in your hand and the bird chirping and smells wafting through the air, if you're present for that, you're going to rate your mood higher than hanging out in a beautiful bubble bath, candles blazing, and thinking about that meeting that's coming tomorrow. Your breath helps you connect to now, as well as stimulating your vagus nerve. And this all then can increase your heart rate variability, which is a marker you might have heard a little bit about. And for our final breathing exercise, we're actually more specifically working on that. So I'll come back and explain a little bit more in a moment. Just want to share with you why use your breath. I hope that this sort of nerdy side, sciencey side is selling it a little bit, which is all really just to say it's evidence-based. There's lots of evidence that breathwork is really effective in terms of your physical health. And what I, as a psychologist, am particularly concerned about and work with daily, your mental health, your emotional well-being. Breathwork is useful. It's effective. And it's not invasive. You don't have to put something in your body. You don't have to do anything fancy to have the benefits of this practice. It's cost effective. It is arguably one of the cheapest and simplest mental health and physical health interventions that you can do. And you can do it on the bus. You can do it in a meeting. You can do it when you get up and go to the toilet or when you're walking to the coffee shop. It's something that's really transportable as well. And it comes from various practices. I'm sitting here and talking about psychoneuroimmunology. This is the area that my dissertation was based on. It's an area I'm really interested in from a psychological standpoint. However, my background is as a yoga teacher and a meditation instructor. Breath has had such a profound role in those arenas and is arguably one of the underpinnings, the pillars in many contemplative traditions. So the breath is really versatile. It's something we as human beings recognize as profound. And this is regardless of religion or practice. We see breath work in both Eastern and Western practices. So in both Eastern and Western traditions, though what I've been describing in terms of the science side, I recognize as perhaps more of a Western medium. With that, I would like you to have some practices to walk away with. I'm going to be mindful of the time. I know I want to leave some time for questions, so please know that we will come to them, but I'd like to introduce you to one more practice before we do head into that conversation. We talked about belly breathing and we practiced belly breathing at the beginning of our time together today. So belly breathing is a great place to start that diaphragmatic breath work. We can start to change a little bit the count of our breath by using something called resonant breathing, which kind of is like the feel good breath work. It's been found to actually change how those neurotransmitters in your brain are being released, such that we're releasing like the feel good messages of your brain. We're giving you that little bit of a high in a natural way. It's also been found that resonant breathing changes your heart rate variability, which is essentially a marker of sympathetic nervous system activation. So to say, parasympathetic nervous system, our ability to shut off and to create more room for variability within our heart rate because we're not stuck in this like quick range of sympathetic nervous system activation. And heart rate variability is, again, a marker that we see in terms of physical health as well as mental health. So resonant breathing essentially requires that we conduct about 6 breaths in a minute, which means that we're counting to about 5 on the inhale and 5 on the exhale. So I'm going to guide you through it. I just want to take a moment before we dive into the second exercise and have you do this rating scale again. So we'll have 4 ratings throughout our time together today. How are you feeling right now? Perhaps with the presentation, I don't know, and other things going on, maybe you're at the flat end, the 1, or maybe you're sitting at a 7, maybe somewhere in between. Just noting how you're feeling emotionally in this moment. And then once more, getting into a comfortable position. So you are welcome to stay standing if you're at a standing desk. If you're able to sit, planting your feet firmly on the floor and allowing your spine to come into this upright and dignified position. And then I'd like you to place one hand on your chest and the other hand on your abdomen. We're going to start with connecting in with the belly breathing once more. So drawing the breath in through your nose and releasing the breath out of your nose. Drawing the breath in and releasing your breath out. And then starting to bring that breath more down into your belly, into your abdomen. So feeling that breath expanding the abdomen out. And then feeling the breath come back, the abdomen comes back in. Belly out, belly in. For a low, slow flow. Take a couple more breaths in your own time, and then I'm going to start by offering a count. So just taking a few more moments, noticing your natural breathing pattern here. And just as a flag when we go into it, if you find this breath count of 5 is not working for you, maybe it's too long and you find yourself gasping, or too short and it feels like it's a little bit too short for comfort and you start to feel a bit more overwhelmed, please adjust. You can mute me if you need. I'll give a wave when we're all done. We're just working with the 5 to kind of get this count of a 6 cycle in a minute. It's an average. So please individualize. All right, so wherever you are in your cycle, releasing now, letting it all go, and then drawing in for 2, 3, 4, 5, out for 2, 3, 4, 5, in for 2, 3, 4, 5, out for 2, 3, 4, 5, in for 2, 3, 4, 5, out for 2, 3, 4, 5, in for 2, 3, 4, 5, out for 2, 3, 4, 5, in for 2, 3, 4, 5, out for 2, 3, 4, 5. That was one cycle. So that was about 1 minute. We're going to try it once more. So just taking a moment to note how it feels here. Maybe you're still continuing. I apologize if I'm about to interrupt the count, but we're going to go through it once more so you can see how quick 1 minute goes. Releasing out with an exhale and then breathing in for 2, 3, 4, 5. Out for 2, 3, 4, 5. In for 2, 3, 4, 5. Out for 2, 3, 4, 5. In for 2, 3, 4, 5. Out for 2, 3, 4, 5. In for 2, 3, 4, 5. Out for 2, 3, 4, 5. In for 2, 3, 4, 5. Out for 2, 3, 4, 5. In for 2, 3, 4, 5. Out for 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 minute. What would it be like to do 1 minute of breath work when you're thirsty and you go to reach for your water bottle? What would it be like to do 1 minute of breath work when you go to the toilet? A breathwork practice, when we say that it's cost effective, when we say that it's time effective, it doesn't have to take a lot in your day. And consider how you feel now. Again, looking back on this scale from 1 to 7, where are you sitting? What did a couple minutes of breath do for you? We go from 1 to 7, and you might put it in your phone again. You might look back at these ratings that we've had through the course of our time together tonight. Because I'm not suggesting that you sit down for 30 minutes every morning to engage in a breathwork practice. If that ends up being something that is conducive to your life, that is workable, please, by all means. However, for a lot of us, that's just not where things are at. When we talk about our stress levels in our society being so high and our days being so full, we want to find things that you can do simply and easily, things that are going to affect your physical health, your mental health, your vitality. If you can do something like this that improves your immune system function, your immunity, as well as having been demonstrated to improve your mood, and it takes a few moments, why not, right? There are many, many other breathing exercises out there, some that are more stimulating, that might really give you a sense of vigor for your day, some like the diaphragmatic breathing that are more relaxing, and then some like the resonance breathing here that really can give that feel-good effect that we know affect your heart rate variability, and we know that that is through the vagus nerve stimulation that they provide. So essentially, we're kind of contracting, releasing, contracting our vagus nerve as we breathe in and breathe out in a very deliberate manner. And the resonance breathing is named for the fact that it actually stimulates your baroreceptor in your heart. So a part of your heart is stimulated through this particular breathing pattern by way of our autonomic nervous system, by way of that vagus nerve. So it's pretty incredible work. And I would really encourage you to give it a try if you're curious, if you're interested. And with that, figuring out ways to bring it into your day that are fairly simple and perhaps are meaningful. So I've given some of my contact details here. I know we're going to have a bit of a conversation now, but to keep in touch, I share resources at Dr. Kaitlin on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and you can head to drkaitlin.com and of course, email me hello@drkaitlin, and there's some free guidebooks that you can access. And I wanted to perhaps point your attention to one that I think could be really useful in terms of the conversation we've had today and in terms of where we're at in the year. We're at this busy point. We're at this point where there can be this, hectic consumerism of Christmas, and there can also be real joy and sacredness. And perhaps looking at the guidebook on sacred ritual might be useful for you, figuring out how you can transform habits, perhaps breath work, a breathing exercise as a habit into a sacred moment in your day, and essentially find a little bit of peace and a little bit of healing along the way. So I am really happy and delighted. I see there's questions. So if we jump into the questions, I'd love to see what's there.
Absolutely. I don't think I've ever been so relaxed in the middle of a live event. So thank you very much, Kaitlin. That was absolutely amazing. And yeah, I know a lot of the audience are feeling the same. I saw Robin posted a 7 on the scale of 1 to 7. So that's awesome to see. And similar improvement noted from Ali and Fabi as well. So thanks guys for sharing. And thank you so much, Kaitlin. It's just all that knowledge, but there's just a way that you break that down that makes it just feel really accessible. And like I said in the comments, I'm sold. Reach for my water bottle, a minute of breath work, I can do that. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and that technique with us. Guys, this is your chance to ask a question of Dr. Kaitlin. So please use that Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We've already got quite a few questions in there, but we are going to get through as many as we can. So I'm going to jump straight in, and off the top, we will ask the question. And if we've sort of gone through these, Kaitlin, it's totally fine to summarize as well. And for anyone wondering, we will be sharing a replay because there's a lot of information to go through as well. First question though is, how can breathwork improve my physical health?
It's in a number of ways. So with the vagus nerve, that nerve is our tool, I suppose, to transformation in a lot of ways. As we strengthen our vagal tone, it means that we can flip from our sympathetic nervous system to our parasympathetic nervous system more quickly. And if we are able to regulate ourselves, if we're able to induce a relaxation response, what that means is we're sending then those same hormonal messages, those same neurochemical messages back up through our body and brain saying, hey, we're safe, we can relax. And if we can relax, then our immune system can tone down a bit. If we can relax, our gastrointestinal tract can relax and sort of do what is natural for it rather than being in those like knots that we know as part of our stress response. And our cardiovascular system can relax. Our heart rate doesn't have to be going a mile a minute. With less wear and tear, it means that we're less likely to experience a cardiovascular event like a heart attack or, a stroke along those lines. We're less likely to experience inflammatory conditions, gastrointestinal conditions, and general immune our immune system being compromised. So maybe a really easy example I could offer, if anyone has ever had a big assignment due, whether it's a project at work or in your studies, and you've gotten sick the moment you've handed that thing up, it's because your immune system's essentially been compromised by the high level of activation it was experiencing through that time. And it's like a bit like that story of the boy who cried wolf, where our immune system can't be activated for so long without collapsing because there's nothing left, right? If we're essentially on 110%, at some point that boom to bust comes into effect. So you're then more likely to get sick and ill. And individuals who do unfortunately experience chronic stress, perhaps carers, new parents, will likely note that they get sick a lot. And that's not just that they have bad luck around being around bugs. It's just that their immune system's been compromised because it was on for such an extended period. So while I'm not a medical doctor and I will refrain from, giving clear medical advice, I think there is very, very good evidence that psychological stress and interventions that help mitigate that affect and effectively enhance our physical health.
Yeah, it is amazing how it affects really every part of our body, every system, stress, but then conversely, how we can, use breath work to support ourselves and improve our health across all those areas as well. So that's really awesome. Another question that came through was, how often should we be practicing breath work to be able to notice changes in ourselves? I feel like 1 minute was pretty amazing, but I'd love to know the real answer, Kaitlin.
I don't know if there is a real answer. Like, it's going to be what you can do regularly, whatever is most effective for you. If we're looking at, let's say, meditation, we know that with meditation, mindfulness practices, that the most bang for buck happens around the 10-minute mark, which is to say that it's the least you would do for the maximal benefit, that if you're doing more than that, you're not necessarily seeing the same increase in terms of the benefit. And I think we might assume that focused attention component of breath work is similarly affected. However, with meditation, we're not necessarily changing our breathing pattern. And we know something like resonance breathing, where we're actually changing how we are physically breathing, that's inducing additional benefits or different benefits. So I think you would see a similar effect in less time, but I'm not aware of any research that's done that same bang for buck ratio that's calculated it. So really do what's workable and just note, from 1 to 7, how am I feeling right now? If your state has changed, something shifted.
Yeah, amazing. And I think, whatever you can do is definitely going to be better than not doing anything, right? I know there's a lot of busy people in our audience, no doubt, as well. So where you can fit it in, whatever you can do, definitely sounds like
so
a good
important,
start.
because also if we say like we have to do this every single day, those of us who may be busy people in the audience likely may have a streak of perfectionism kind of running through the thread as well. And then we go, oh, well, I failed. I didn't do 30 minutes every day before breakfast. I slept in because I've been working until, whatever time last night, or something came up with the family. And then if we go, well, I didn't do it, therefore it's a write-off, we're less likely to come back to it. When we talk about habits or rituals, it's really about, okay, if we have something small, something that's workable, like when we're going to the toilet or getting the water, something we're already doing, pairing it, we're more likely to do it regularly. And when we have success at something, we're actually more likely to come back to it. And we're more likely to have success with small things.
Yeah, amazing. Interesting question just came through. Why can it be easier to breathe out and harder to breathe in?
It probably depends on the individual. So
Right.
breathing out, if we were going to kind of like break it down, it's not totally this way, but I think simplistically it kind of works to be like, okay, if we're breathing out, if we're exhaling, that's like a release, letting go, that's parasympathetic nervous system. The inhale might be sympathetic, stimulating, exciting. So for some people, perhaps letting go feels easier. For some people, taking breath in feels easier. And that might just be where you're at and the breath pattern that feels most comfortable for you. One thing I'd just be sort of mindful of is that in doing breath work, it is helpful to work with someone who maybe knows a little bit about the practice. If you're doing anything that is really vigorous or is really changing the ratio of your inhale to exhale, because that does change the ratio of oxygen to carbon dioxide in your body as well. So something just to be mindful of that for some. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That actually was a question that I had. I was doing some workouts recently with a trainer, and part of the process that he was taking us through was to use really short inhales and exhales prior to a workout. So it definitely felt like we were getting really kind of literally puffed up, ready to work out. So how did the different sort of types, I know there's lots of different techniques of breath work, what are the different effects some of them can have, like the one that I was doing with this fast breathing?
Yeah, that was likely really stimulating, Abby. And I suppose, like, if we're thinking, I'm going to go with panic attacks as a bit of an example, because I know that's something that's really scary and it has a reasonable amount to do with the breath as well as psychological influences. But often the reason we experience a panic attack is because we're actually starting to feel overwhelmed. We're starting to feel symptoms of panic. And because we're scared and our system's going into that sympathetic nervous system state, we're trying to draw more air in, but we're less out of that intuitive running from tiger. We're not like burning anything. We're not pumping anything as we're running. We forget to breathe out. Like we think, oh, I'm starved of oxygen, I'm going to breathe in more and more. But actually what we need to do is to let go, to release, to rebalance our oxygen and carbon dioxide levels. So the inhales, that oxygen can be really stimulating. You were obviously doing it in a situation where it was more controlled and maybe it wasn't for such a long period of time, and there's maybe not the other associations and influences that others experience. But that's kind of what I see as a bit of a parallel, just for any individuals who might be listening who might have struggled with panic. Maybe you wouldn't necessarily try what Abby's tried until you're at that point.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that as well, because there's a lot of talk about breath work at the moment, a lot of different techniques. And yeah, I personally felt within those sessions, it wasn't a relaxing experience, but I could see the benefit, but it definitely wasn't like what we've been doing this evening as well. So just really good to understand a bit more about that too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so many more questions. So thank you so much, everyone that's putting them through. Someone was asking, is breath work something I can practice easily on my own in the future? So I guess this goes a bit to that point. Is at what point can we do it on our own as a real practice? Is it instantly, or is it a good idea to sort of get a little bit of support in those early days to help build that?
I think with the breathing exercises we did today, with the caveat that with that resonance breathing, the 5 may or may not necessarily be effective for you, but just kind of checking in with how you're feeling. But certainly with the diaphragmatic breathing, like the lower slow flows, training yourself to take your breath from your chest down to your belly, that's certainly something you can start with now. And then adding in perhaps that count, that anchoring count. For some, it might even be that you extend the exhale slightly. Maybe you do inhale 5, exhale 6, just seeing what kind of works for you, but going slow with it. If you go from, let's say, oh, I'm going to inhale for 2 and I'm going to exhale for 8, and that's where you start, and you're like holding yourself to it, I wouldn't necessarily try that myself. I wouldn't necessarily recommend someone else tries that. I would think you start kind of at these more neutral places, and then you can build and expand from there. There's lots of beautiful books on breath work, and there are lots of exercises out there, but maybe just checking in on your emotional and physical state and using, wise mind to kind of figure out the path, being like, okay, well, this feels like something I could do. If you try it and you start to feel a bit dizzy and you're unsure, stop, check in with someone and see what's going on. If you are working with any sort of professionals like medical or mental health professionals, checking in with them too. They'll be great gauges around what they might recommend and resources. yoga instructors, meditation instructors, and then dedicated breathwork instructors are other options too. And then, when you do work with professionals in these realms, I always say, trust your gut, right? Not everyone's going to be right for you. Not everyone necessarily has the same training when we're in unregulated fields. So just because someone has a label that may be self-appointed, like, don't necessarily feel like you have to put yourself in a vulnerable situation, that there's something that you're missing. Wise mind approaches here too.
Yeah, I love that. It's really great advice and very, very important as well. And we have put, and we will put again, Caitlin's website and Instagram handle in the chat box as well, because Kaitlin obviously has a lot of experience in this area, and is very evidence-based and has a lot of really interesting articles and content as well, that I would really encourage everyone to check out also. So have a look at those too. Kaitlin, how is breathwork different, or how is it the same as meditation? Can we talk about the two and the benefits?
Yeah, and it will probably depend on the style of meditation too. Some meditation styles do involve very deliberate breath work. Some meditation styles involve like a natural breathing pattern where you kind of notice how your breath is flowing. So it would really depend on the style. They don't have to be separate, and they can be together, if that makes sense. I think by its nature, like when you're becoming aware of your breath, you're becoming more mindful, like you're becoming more present moment focused on what's happening, how you're moving breath in and out of your body, and how that is affecting your physical state. So I think there's a lot of overlap in terms of mindfulness and in terms of meditation. So I would consider mindfulness to be present moment awareness, like a deliberate way of paying attention on purpose and as best you can, non-judgmentally, to what's coming up. And then meditation, there are specific styles in that. So there might be a focused meditation where you're focusing on your breath or something else. There might be mantra-based meditations where you're focused on singing a mantra or, counting prayer beads and the like. So it's different. If that answers it. I'm sorry, I don't have a very clear answer. Yeah, but there's just so much overlap, because the breath, like I said, is in all these traditions, and I think it's a part of it. It's just a matter of whether it's deliberately altered or whether it's noticed for its own pattern.
Yeah, that's a really, really great way of differentiating. It does seem, I don't know if it's just me, but it does seem like there's a lot of chat about breath work at the moment. Yeah, so, and it's really interesting. I'm not sure, why that is or what your thoughts are on that, but I was curious as to what some of the cultural origins are of the practice and kind of where it spreads culturally, or where it comes from, because I know there's quite a bit of crossover, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, it even happens in song, right? Like in singing, people are controlling their breaths, and there's breath work inherently in that. I think there's been some research that's looked at, for instance, different hymns in like the Catholic sort of Christian culture going back, that they actually have that 6 count that we're practicing essentially in the resonant breathing, whereas that's similar to the mantras in Buddhist cultures. So it's really widespread, I suppose. Modern breathwork is becoming really topical because there's some really prolific people out there sharing this wisdom and this information. And I think the cultural context is that we're all looking for something to support us right now. Like we're all recognizing, high levels of stress, high levels of burnout. We're like, well, what can we do? What can we do in terms of alternating our lifestyle or simple practices if we want to keep ourselves well? And this, I think, is a very cost-effective, easy to implement practice. And I think that's where a lot of the interest is coming from. We're like, oh, wow, my breath matters. And I mean, probably lots of you joining us today have experienced COVID, right? A virus that affects our respiratory system. And anyone who had struggled with breath during that illness or other illnesses, you likely know how important breath is and how anxious and uncomfortable you can feel, not just because your immune system is obviously like fighting and you're exhausted, but you can't get a proper breath. And it's so understandable that we would feel anxious in that moment. We need our breath to survive. Our breath is our lifeline. So how interesting that maybe we appreciate breath a little bit differently in these cultures too.
Yeah, it's so interesting and very timely. I think, from a cultural and time perspective of where we're at now, but I think even just for tonight, this event, this evening, this is our last event for the year, and going into a hopefully really fun, busy Christmas and festive season. I think it's really amazing to be thinking about using this practice now. There's probably going to be lots of scenarios. I was going to say, family, interesting family conversations over the lunch table. A few breaths in the kitchen while you're basting the turkey, maybe your saving grace.
Hand on your chest and belly when you head off to the toilet, like finding a way through.
Yeah, but even I think just a lot of social contact after a lot of time in isolation over the last couple of years. It's it can feel quite exhausting, right? So I think to be able to bring ourselves back to our breath seems like a really important and helpful tool as well. Well, we are pretty much at time, and we do have, as always, lots of questions. If we didn't get to your question, thank you so much for putting your questions in the first place. But if you didn't, we will definitely endeavour to have those answered in the coming days. But Kaitlin, I want to thank you so much. I know you've got so much going on, and we are really grateful for all of your time and wisdom that you share with us at Drop, and sharing this really special practice also. So thank you so much for your time again today.
That's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. And I hope it's, a little opportunity for us to all practice some presence, going back to the mindfulness and meditation reference through this holiday season.
Yeah, it's really lovely. Thank you so much. And also to all of our attendees, again, busy time of year, really appreciate you guys showing up. And as we said, there will be a replay also on our YouTube channel, where we've got lots of our events up there, and on our website. So you'll see that in the coming days. If you want more information about Drop and what we do, make sure you visit our website and join the waitlist for our next Wellbeing release. And as I mentioned, Kaitlin's website and social handles are in the chat as well. Please follow her. She has so much great content, and obviously it's just such a joy to listen to your lovely, calm voice and hear your wisdom. And I think it'll be an amazing tool for everyone throughout this holiday season. So thank you, everybody. Thanks again, Kaitlin. And we look forward to seeing you again next year.